Was it her? It was the day I finally got divorced after so many struggles. Carla, who had been threatening to take most of my assets, had lost, and watched her defeated face had lifted all my stress. I guess she was the only cause of my anxiety and depression, which was now gone. As I left the courtroom as a single and free man, I paused for a brief moment and took a deep breath. Inhaling the earthy smell, I could still feel the dampness in the air after the rainfall. Perhaps it was the rain that had helped my almost lost case. Whatever it was, I was happy. I turned in the direction where I'd parked my car while reaching my hand in my left pocket and fishing around for the keys. Once my hand touched the plastic shell, I grabbed it and pulled it out. Reaching my car, I pushed the unlock button on the key before opening the door and entering. Once I entered the key into the ignition, I reached the stereo and played my favorite song, singing along the lyrics before starting the drive. It took me about an hour to reach home, and since my entire day went in the court, it was finally time to cook dinner. It was a relief that I could be cooking for only myself from then on, and not a full-course meal for her too. I bet the man she cheated with wouldn't spoil her like I used to. Whatever, it was her loss. After deciding to cook lasagna, I started preparing for it. Once I finished layering it up, I topped the dish with mozzarella before putting it in the oven. As I was waiting for my food to be cooked, I heard the doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I wondered who it could be while walking to the front door. I tried seeing through the peephole who it was, but when I couldn't see anyone, I had to open the door to check. There was a package lying on the doormat. I didn't remember ordering anything, so it had to be someone who sent it. I grabbed the thing and checked for the sender's name or address, but there was nothing on it. I tore open the brown paper off the package, revealing a congratulations note and a porcelain statue inside. Guessing someone from my friends list must have sent it, I didn't think much about it and tossed the package to the side table. The timer alarm set off, and I walked to the oven before taking out the lasagna as the freshly cooked aroma filled my senses. After having my dinner, I headed to my bedroom to get some sleep. I'm an insomniac, so I knew sleeping would be hard, but for the past few days, I've been doing some yoga. It had been quite a few months since I started suffering, but that night was the first when I was able to fall asleep without the help of any sleeping pills. However, I was awakened around 4 a.m. by the noise of glass shattering. Panicked, I ran toward the source only to find the living room's window broken as it was shards spread across the nearby area. Alerted by whoever it was inside the house, I started looking around. That was when I noticed the side table where I'd put the package was empty. The person had taken the damn statue, possibly still hiding inside the house. I took out my phone and dialed 911, informing them about the possible break-in. The police arrived shortly and they searched the entire house, but despite the broken window and the stolen package, there was nothing missing. Since they couldn't find the culprit, they returned after telling me that I could call them if I found anything or anyone suspicious. The next day, I sealed off that window and installed a camera in the living room just in case something similar happened again. Following evening, when I returned from work, I found a familiar-looking package lying on the doormat once again. Picked it up and checked for the sender's name, but just like the previous one, there was nothing written on it. For some reason, I felt a strange fear crawling inside me as I started tearing the packaging, revealing the same contents inside as the previous package. There had to be some relation between this damn package and the mysterious break-in, so I decided to set up a hidden camera around the package. I took it inside, placing it on the table before I planted the cameras around it. Later that night, after dinner, I stood guard inside the living room, waiting for that person who broke in to do it again. However, the night went by and no one did. Around 4 a.m, I finally dozed off, but the moment I did, There it was again, the crashing sound, jolting me up from my sleep. I ran there only to find the other window glass broken, and once again the package had disappeared. Since I had already planted the cameras, I went to check them out only to be horrified by the fact that each one of them had disappeared. The person who broke in stole my cameras too. I called the police and informed them about it. Once again, they came to check but couldn't find anything. The same incident kept repeating itself, and each time I would lay traps to catch the culprit, only to end up in the same situation. I'd call the police each time, only for the same results every time. Eventually, they stopped taking me seriously and thought I had some sort of mental issue. I tried explaining to them that I was not having hallucinations and those things truly happened, but they didn't believe me. With each passing day, my insomnia got worse, and falling asleep kept getting harder for me. As I'm writing my experience today, I have no idea when or where I last slept. Unlike before, I think I'm starting to hallucinate now, and I'm losing my mind. If you're reading this, please, if there's anything you could do to help before I completely go insane, you know what? I think it could be her still trying to make my life miserable. Please help me. I'm terrified.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. I sometimes feel like what I saw in the news about the boy stabbing the girl publicly to death could happen to me any day now. It won't be with a knife or anything. Well, you never know. It could be. But judging through my condition, it would be different. I can even picture the headlines now. A woman of the age of 32 was beaten to death by her husband. The stab marks appear to be from a broken alcohol bottle. Her in-laws knew what was going on behind that closed door, but decided to put a blind eye on them. This was not the first time I had pictured such a headline. Every time I was brutally beaten after his returns from one of those drinking parties, I would always stare at the wall for hours with my aching wounds thinking of such things. I knew he'd end up killing me one of these days, but I just wasn't sure what day it would be. He's a loving and devoted husband during the day when he's sober, but his personality takes a 180 turn at night when he beats me to a pulp. It's like he's an entirely different person after drinking, one I can't recognize. I couldn't stop my trail of thoughts as I wiped my tears and looked at him sleeping in our bed peacefully, while I sat on the floor with my aching body unable to move because of the twinging in my cuts and wounds. This was nothing compared to my constant mental agony. At least now I was sure that he would not touch me till the next time he drinks, but the perturbation I felt whenever he was outside or was going to be late was the kind of misery I don't want anymore. Looking at the shattered pieces of the broken bottle, I knew in my mind that I had to clean all this before morning, so he doesn't step on it after waking up. But a part of me wanted it to happen after everything he put me through. I looked over at the wall clock to see the time. It was 2 in the morning. 1 hour remained till our 4-year-old daughter Aisha woke up. So I somehow gathered the strength left in me, pulled out the glass pieces from my leg, and stood up. Before doing any cleaning, I went to apply disinfectant so it doesn't fester. Trust me, it hurts like hell cleaning all these wounds. Tears were still flowing at a constant pace, but I made sure to not let a single fragment of the voice out of my mouth. After I was done cleaning and applying disinfectant, I went to grab a broom, wiper, and dustpan to clean the mess he made. I returned to the room and gave a scan of all the whiskey spread on the floor before I started cleaning. I didn't want to sleep next to the man who had exhibited the embodiment of a monster in front of me a few hours ago, so I just sat on the sofa that was beside the wardrobe. But before I could put my head down, I heard Aisha's cry. She was in my mother-in-law's room where I had put her after she fell asleep because I had sensed the drunkenness in Ryan's voice over the call. As I was walking out of the room, I saw my mother-in-law carrying her to our room. She averted her eyes knowing the state I was in because of his son. I didn't say anything either, but smiled knowingly, sending more guilt to her direction. I took Aisha from her lap and walked back to the room to console her. The morning came. I hadn't gotten a single wink of sleep, but I still went to the kitchen to make breakfast for everyone. Everyone knew my condition, but not a single one in the family came forward to say I didn't have to do it, or at least help me. When I carried the tray into the room to give breakfast to my husband, he had just gotten up. He looked at me, remembering what he did to me last night, and asked me to come closer to him. I knew what was going to happen when he leaned his head on my shoulder. He apologized as always. I gave him a forced smile without saying a word in response as I placed breakfast on the side table. It was Sunday, so I didn't have to go to work. I guess I forgot to mention that I work as a teacher in a nearby school, and my subject is science. I wanted to become a veterinarian, but I couldn't pursue it after my marriage, looking at how my husband was against it. But somehow he allowed me as a teacher. Anyway, my friend called me a few minutes earlier and told me that they would be dropping by, so I started preparing snacks for them. Since I don't have any strength left to cook, I just prepared the store-bought ones. She arrived in the evening with her 3 cute daughters and started telling me about how she had finally gotten approval on her leave and that she'd be heading to her hometown with her family. She was working as a radiographer in the Holly Family Hospital and also had a degree in homeopathy. Looking at how her husband let her complete her studies even after marriage and the amount of support he was providing her, I couldn't help but feel envious. The way she blushed to her ears even after 3 kids on the slightest mention of her husband's name said so much about how he treated her. She didn't need to boast about it. Anyone with eyes could see how happy she looked. I've always seen her husband treating her with respect, addressing her as Op when talking to her. Op means you, and this word states a form of respect. I was in the kitchen preparing for dinner after my friend left when I received a phone call from Ryan. He informed me that he would be coming home late as he had encountered one of his old friends. I knew he was going to drink the moment he said that. You would think that Muslims don't drink since it's haram, just like Maram's husband, but no. These days, not many people are real Muslims just because they claim to be. Just take my husband as an example. He not just drinks, but he beats his wife and the mother of his child. My body started to shiver. I started getting panic attacks as I realized that this was going to be another barbarity of his. I had to escape it by any means necessary. I looked around the house, only to find everyone in the living room locked inside watching some drama together on the television. It was my chance. I went to my room, packed mine and Aisha's things, and before anyone could notice, I got out of the house. I strode across the road, still scared of getting discovered. The only thing I did was break my SIM card and buy a new one. Then I informed my father about everything, including that I had left home yet again. I had run away multiple times before and went to my parents' house in Bihar, India, but ended up returning after hearing his cries and pleas along with the promises to never harm me before. The intention of me running then was to make him stop hurting me. But this time, I was determined to never return, no matter what. This time, I was ready to get a divorce from him, and my father, as always, was going to support my decision.
Growing up, my fraternal twin brother and I shared a room. I think both of us would have preferred to have our own room, but our dad used our extra room for a study. He was a lawyer and needed it as his office at home, I suppose. Anyhow, I slept on the top bunk, and my brother slept on the bottom bunk. The worst thing about sleeping on the top bunk is that I tend to have to get up several times a night to go to the bathroom. I guess I must have a small bladder or something. I also drink a lot of pop, which probably has a lot more to do with it. Or it might have had something to do with the fact that my brother tosses and turns all night, and it wakes me up over and over again. One night when I was 15, when I went to bed, I noticed that my brother had already gone to bed. I had originally intended to stay up and read in bed for a while, but couldn't turn my light on if my brother was asleep. Instead, I took my Android up on the top bunk with me and decided to play some games on my Nintendo emulator app. I played an old Dragon Warrior game with the sound off. Right on cue, no less than an hour after I got into bed, my bladder started telling me that I had to get up. So, trying to be as quiet as I possibly could, I put my phone down and got up and went to the bathroom. I did my thing, and then I came back into the room. When I opened the door, the light shone in my room for a second, and it must have bugged my brother a little bit because he grumbled something, flopped over, and was quiet again. I quietly apologized, but he didn't reply. Trying my best to not wake my brother up again, I climbed up the ladder, back onto the top bunk. I noticed when I got up there that my cell phone light was blinking green, which indicated that someone had sent me a text message. I picked up the phone, wondering who would be sending me a text that time of night. When I tapped the screen, my blood froze in my veins as I read a text from my twin brother that simply asked, "Hey bro, I'm gonna be out late with my girlfriend. Can you cover for me?" At first I thought it was a joke. My brother could have sent the text to me from the lower bunk when I was using the bathroom. It was the sort of thing that he may have done. I slowly texted him back. I thought that if he responded, I'd be able to see the reflection of the light on the wall from his cell phone. I asked him if he was joking. Immediately, he texted back and said, "No, why would you think I was joking?" I didn't see any light. I answered and said that I just saw him sleeping in the bunk below me, and that I didn't find this funny at all. The text back from Ian was almost immediate. He told me that it was definitely not him in the lower bunk, and if I was not joking, I had better get out of that room immediately. Scared half to death, I grabbed my phone, skipped the ladder, and jumped off the bed and ran for the door. Despite what might have been better judgment, when I opened the door, I had to look back and see who was sleeping in my bed. Part of me still suspected it was Ian playing a joke on me. However, when the light shone on the bed, it was empty. No one was there. Freaked out and confused, I turned the light on. No one was in the bed. I crept slowly over to the bed and looked under it, half expecting to see a face looking back at me. No one was there. I looked in the closet. No one was there. I guess the fact that there was no one there should have made me not scared, but it was scarier. I ran out the door and went to my parents and explained what had happened. I hated to throw Ian under the bus like that, but if there was an intruder in the house, I thought finding that person was more important. My parents and I searched the entire house, but we didn't find anyone or any indication that anybody had broken into the house. I wasn't able to go back to bed until Ian got home. It was just way too creepy. I never knew what I saw in the bottom bunk that night. All I know is there was definitely someone there.
Deep water. We were not meant to be together, being forced into a marriage that was not supposed to happen. I was waiting for one of the families from New York. I was an accountant, and I used to look at books of all the businesses that the Giovannis had. Now, if you don't know who the Giovanni is, let me tell you in a sentence. It is a family that you don't ever want to be associated with. My uncle moved from Italy to America, and in America, he found a friend in Roberto Giovanni, who, just like my uncle, migrated from Italy to America. Giovanni's owned everything: the local shops, restaurants, politicians, the police. My uncle introduced me to Roberto Giovanni when I graduated from college. I wanted to work with the presidential candidates on his campaign. But then my uncle said, "Look, you can either work with the pricks, these politicians, or you can work for someone who puts them in his pocket and owns them." I wanted something better, so I went with my uncle and met Roberto. He was tall and built-up Italian. He patted my shoulders and, with probably a Cuban cigar in his mouth, said, "So this is the guy you've been talking about, Romano?" And my uncle replied, "Yes, Roberto. He's a good kid. Good with numbers. He knows stuff." And with his hands gesturing even more, "You know stuff, papers, laws, you know," Roberto replied. "All right, Romano. Take him to the business room. Explain to him what we do and what we want to do with our money." Then he gestured to me and came closer and said, "Also, hey kid, come over here." He took a bunch of $100 bills in his hand and said, "Buy a suit, all right? Romano will take you to the shop and buy something that stands out. If you're gonna manage business and numbers, you gotta act the part." That was the first day that I started working for Roberto Giovanni. After a few months of working for Roberto Giovanni, I had information on how much of the business and what all the other businesses did Giovanni hold in the list of all the politicians and cops that he had in his pockets. I became the main man of the operation and kept all the numbers in every detail. We were more like a family than a workplace. Roberta had a wife and 2 daughters, Talia and Rafina. Rafina was supposedly the wild one, and the one who could hold a grudge. She once got one of her lovers beaten up real bad because she saw her talking with some other girl. Don't even ask me what happened to the girl. She was batshit crazy, and I stayed the hell away from her. Talia, on the other hand, was quiet and probably was born in the wrong family. As years passed on, I had a strong hold on every information I had on the Giovannis, and now Roberto trusted me with everything. October 12th. It was a Monday morning, and it was raining as it has never. The streets were flooded with the overflowing sewers, and nothing but scum skimmed over those streets. I ran towards the house, and outside it was Roberto, drenched in rain, waiting for me as if his life depended on it. "Hurry, kid, I've been waiting for you. Where the hell have you been?" I replied, "The roads are blocked with scum water." And he held me by my shoulder and brought me closer. "Hey kid, you're a wonderful kid, all right? And you will help me do these papers so much better. Now I am saying this because I like you like my own son, and I want you to know that the next thing that comes out of your mouth will decide your future." I looked at him, confused and clueless, and then he said, "I'm going to marry you to my daughter. Now I really would have liked you to marry Talia, but it's Rafina who you gonna be with. Don't ask me why I'm doing it. Just remember, with one yes, you'll be taking over everything." He married Rafina because he was scared that she might actually end up screwing the whole family over. Now I was the family, so all the business was open to me, and I was taking care of everything while Rafina was being a reckless woman, spending everything, and making it impossible for all of us. Our marriage was good. We barely fought, probably because we didn't care enough about each other or the marriage. So the primary years of our marriage went on to understand each other, but there was none. Soon, the petty quarrels of the married life started, and Rafina always made sure who her father was. There was no way I could have won any arguments. She would always bring up her father and threaten me. I didn't care much about them because I knew Roberto wouldn't care. But one day, when me and Uncle Romano were out doing a business, Rafina went to her father and complained that I hit her. even though I didn't and I was out of town. I came back and Roberto called me in. "Hey kid, come in. How's everything? You feeling good? Rafina treating you good?" I chuckled and I said, "Yeah, she can be a handful sometimes." Roberto looked at me and said, "Now Rafina came to me and said you slapped her." I objected in between, and he injected and continued, "Wait, I know you didn't. You were out doing a job I sent you to. I know it. But the thing is, my daughter, she's got the habit of having everything, and now it's too late to correct it. I just want you to know, I don't have any hard feelings for you. I love you, and you're my son, alright? Stop calling me Mr. Giovanni, and call me Dad like Rafia does, okay?" Completely confused by this conversation, I started heading back to my home, and I was pretty tired from the trip, when suddenly, one of the goons of Roberto roughed me up. And now the conversation made sense. I went back home with a broken nose and saw Rafina smiling. I looked at her and said, "Glad my broken nose made you smile." I woke up angry. I was pissed about the whole incident, and the incident triggered something in me. There was this sudden desire for revenge that I had. I went to see Roberto the first morning. I went and he welcomed me and asked me while laughing, "What happened to your nose? You're an alright kid. I'm sorry. I got to make my daughter happy too. And also, I got you both tickets for Italy. You leave in 3 days." And that was it. That was my limit. I was done being controlled by a scum of a family. So I decided to take my revenge on them. I had 3 days to arrange everything, and so I packed up all the papers and all the documents. It was all a strong evidence against the family, and I gathered them all and went to the feds. I knew which one to go to. Every cop and politician was under the payroll. I had them on my list. This was a very big catch for the feds, and I did not want any part of it. So I told the feds what I wanted to do. 3 days later, I and Rafina were on a boat in Sardinia, Italy. We were getting ready to head to the sea to watch the dolphins. As soon as we entered the deep waters, we could see the dolphins emerging, and I saw her eyes sparkling. For a minute, I looked at her, and there was this rare innocence in her. But I was definite about my goal. I took out my phone and called her father, and gave the phone to her. She refused, but then I said, "This could be the last time you talk to him." She snatched the phone from my hand, all confused, and turns out it was the last time that she talked to him, in the middle of the sea, in the deep waters. She found out that her dad was shot by the feds. They wanted to bring him in, but he wasn't ready to give up. She was devastated, and came in close and hugged me. I stood there for a second, and then she asked me, "Who would do such a thing?" As she was crying and holding me, I stepped back and broke the hug. I looked at her and smiled. It was me. I made it possible. I almost kind of knew the old man would panic, but really, the feds? He thought he could outrun the feds. He was way over in his hand. Well, God rest his soul in hell. She was furious, and as she tried to charge on me, the 2 men in the boat held her. I hired the men to make sure that she doesn't act the way she is. She looked at me. "Why would you do it? You're a murderer." I looked back at her and I chuckled. I did not murder him. He was killed because of his actions. He was a piece of shit. Do you know how many people has he killed or got killed? Because I know. I have their names. So, good riddance. Now her tears were all settled. So she looked at me and asked, "Who helped you?" And I looked at her excitingly and said, "Wouldn't you like to know?" And then I told the men to tie her up, and they did exactly what I said. They tied her up, and she was sitting down on the corner of the boat. Soon, another boat came in. We all boarded the other boat. She was still sitting in the corner with her hands tied, and the boat was empty. It was just her, in the middle of the sea, in the deep waters. Now, I could have just killed her, but I wanted her to suffer. The boat had a bottle of water and supply that would last her 2 days. Now I gave her a choice, to come back with me and live like normal people doing normal things. Or she can act like the tough gangster daughter she is and try to make out of the place on her own. She was stubborn, so she chose to stay back on the boat on her own. So in a way, I did not kill her. She probably did it herself. I came back a week later and took care of all the legit business Roberto had and married Talia. And for the next few years, enjoyed my life to its full extent. It has been 6 years since that incident, and today, I received a letter in my mailbox, a postcard from Sardinia that said, "Hey, husband,